Drinking out of my sponsored water bottle right now. This podcast sponsored by Santico.
Love that.
Nothing better than a good sip of Santico water. I know what they're here for. They're here to see two white guys on a podcast. That's what the internet wants.
Yeah, that's, the internet demands and we shall provide.
And to my understanding, two white guys on a podcast have only the best opinions in the world, right?
So I've been told. Yes.
So we are the two fact guys. We know everything that is ever existed in the planet. Yes. And Steve knows even more than me. That's why I brought him here. But you might be asking, what is this? Is this podcast but outside? No. For those of you that are new here, this is a podcast where I have my friends on here that do cool things, but also are kind of multifaceted people that have a lot of other interests. And I'm very curious in what they're interested in because, me just being a white guy on my own podcast, it's going to get a little boring. And so Steve, last night, it was like midnight, and he was like, should I come to Illinois? And I was like, yeah, I think you should. And then you got in at like what, like 4 a.m.?
Yeah, something about
and it's
something
what?
Like that.
It's like 6 a.m. right now?
Close enough.
Close
it
enough.
Might as well be breakfast still.
Yeah,
it's before noon, so that counts.
So he kind of, spent his own dime to come out here to do this podcast. I make people pay to come on here.
That's true. That's very true.
Yeah, it's a thing I get in trouble for frequently on this podcast, in fact. But in the midst of getting in trouble, I also like to introduce the people that take flights out here for this podcast. So let's hear it. Steve, thanks for, taking the grand flight, the red eye out here for this podcast. Let them know a little bit about you. Let them know what you do, who you are. I mean, I'll just say it right now. I met Steve through skating, but go ahead, fill in the hosts.
Sure.
Not the hosts. We're the hosts. Fill in everybody.
Fair enough. I need to preface this by saying I'm terrible at introducing other people, let alone myself. So there's that. But yeah, man.
You're just a guy.
I'm just a guy.
And you don't do anything.
I do a lot of things.
Oh,
but,
you do?
I do a fair amount. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
So it's, I can go a little bit further in there. Yeah, I can try that. So I'm from here originally. Kind of grew up.
From these woods.
In these woods.
Straight out of the woods.
Straight out of the woods.
Yep.
Illinois native, living on the West Coast like most people from the Midwest on the migration. Been there for a while now, like 5-6 years now.
I've heard LA's like La La Land.
It is. Yes, it very much is.
So you're living in La La Land right now?
Quite literally living in La La Land, but it does have amazing skate spots. And that was really... all you had to say was skate spots and good weather and skipping winter. Okay, good enough for me. So that worked out there. But yeah, grew up skating here. Man, we're going on 17 years now. That's really led me into a lot of different projects. As you know, skateboarding kind of offers you up to a lot of creative people, like my good friend Max here, which is why this podcast exists, which is amazing.
And we just have so many fans. We've got 2 fans. We got people that were hearing us talking right now, and they heard our voice from afar, and now they're coming to see what's up.
I can hear the subscribers rolling in.
I can hear them. I can physically see them. We have 2 of them.
I can also hear them leaving at a rapid pace the more we talk. But that's okay.
They're leaving. They're slowly exiting. And they're walking right on out.
Yes.
But you mentioned being, multifaceted, and you mentioned that my camera might fall over because of the wind. But let them know. So what do you, we met skating, and you've been skating for how long?
Oh gosh, 17 years now. That's wild. Yeah, so 17 years after this February. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's been a hot minute.
It's crazy. How do you? Yeah, see, look at this. We've got a lot of interest in this podcast. There's we got two fans that are just willing to listen.
He's gonna put it where it lies.
He's gonna put it. Let's get
legit.
We're watching someone do a chip. He's got a nice swing, nice setup. Okay, cool. He's got a good wind up.
Got a good wind up. Yeah, around the chip.
Oh, dude, we got Tiger Woods out here, bro. Let's go. Oh. Damn, Tiger.
Look at that.
That's my boy.
Let's go.
That's a hole in one we just witnessed.
We just witnessed a birdie.
Sorry, I didn't see you there. We've got a pedestrian hit in the head.
Well, spontaneous events that happen. We can't make this stuff up. So.
This is very real. Someone got hit in the... Oh, God.
Anyways.
I see no Tiger Woods out here. I'm a little bit of a lie. But anyways, I know exactly where you left off. Because as I mentioned right from the jump of this podcast, I am the smartest man in the world that knows everything. So you primarily grew up skating in Naperville, right?
Correct.
And I guess, how do you feel about it in general, just as far as like your own progression with it? Because a lot of people that I talk to are always like, that don't skate, are always like, oh man, I wish I could do that.
Right.
But I'm worried about getting hurt. Or, oh man, I got hurt, so I don't do that anymore.
Right.
But I guess one thing that is kind of relevant as it comes to like Steve and I talking about stuff is like progression and like as far as it relates to like perspective and how you like kind of keep the ball rolling with, especially when it comes to skating. Because I also know people that have started skating for like 2 weeks and then they're like, not for me, and they just chuck the old board away.
Sure.
So, I don't know. I want to hear your perspective on it.
Yeah. I'm super actually glad you brought that up, too, because I feel like I can trace everything back to any sort of creative pursuit or really just any mindset that stems from skating. And anybody who's skateboarded for even a moderate amount of time can understand this, like, sort of headspace and mindset.
True.
It's, you first and foremost, you really have to have, I know you hear this all the time, but, like, I've learned when it comes to sort of being passionate about something, you don't really develop that from the jump. You just have a very fierce interest of that, but it's how much you choose to do it and how much you feed into it that burns that into what most people would refer to it as a passion. You have to feed it, you develop it. So just like a garden, the more you tend to it, the more attention you give to it, the more strongly you feel about it. And the way that I've looked at this specifically, you know, especially for other people, like everyone's always going to have different interests, right? And I think it has to speak to them on the level of their values and what they value.
That's true.
Does it give them, you know, freedom? Does it give them a sense of childlike wonder? Is it an escape for them? You know, there's a laundry list of things that skateboarding, not just skateboarding, but really any activity can mean to you because you're the one giving meaning to it.
True.
So everyone's got a story. Everyone has a different story. Everyone has a different timeline. To your point, for people that may have started, didn't get into it, wasn't for them, you know, another activity took place in their life or a different event took place in their life. And then, you know, even later in life, they found themselves coming back to it. Again, there's always, everything's a remix, right? Everything always kind of comes around at different times in different ways. You just come at it with different experience. And, you know, to your point, I've even met people who I've known in high school who did not skate, but they picked up a skateboard during COVID. And it's their new favorite passion now. And again, I think it's been really wonderful for people who've taken the time to reflect and, you know, really understand, like, hey, like, what am I missing in my life, you know, outside of, you know, work obligations, adulthood, stuff like that.
Right. And I want to dabble in that in a little bit, but keep going on.
It's, you know, I'm kind of all over the place here, but I think to sum up your question, what does it mean to you? Again, it boils down to values, right? I think for me as a skateboarder, you know, a lot of skateboarders can relate to this, is like, as an athlete, you want to just always continue to push yourself and get better. And, you know, when you're, you know, especially with the level of where skateboarding's at today, like
everyone's good.
But the way that you get better is by being with friends who are, you know, continuing to do it despite their obligations because they love it so much.
I think for me, it's interesting too, because like you're talking about, like, as far as it relates to like loving it so much. I think for me, when I first started, it was literally about the skating itself. For sure. Like, it was like, what trick can you do? What YouTube tutorials are you going to watch to learn the next trick? Like, what part is getting released? Who's working on what video? Like, that was like the essence of it for me. But as I've got older, I feel like the essence of it has felt more about like community, in a sense of like, now I'm watching other creators that make skate content that I'm like, oh damn, let me see what's good with this person.
Yeah.
Let me see what they're thinking on skating, or see what they're making. Or it's like, maybe it's not even that. Maybe it's like something like you and I are hanging out at the skate park and there's one of your friends, and suddenly now it's like, damn, well, one of your friends is out here, has their own tattoo place or something like that. Or like, oh damn, this person makes their own stickers. Let me see what's up with that. Like, and I think that as I've got older has became like very prevalent, because it's, skating is not, it's something that I think, much like other things in this world, when you don't know much about it, it can get overlooked, and skating in particular has a very negative connotation to it. And so that's kind of what I wanted to ask you about too, is like, what has been your experience with skateboarding as far as like negative connotation? I've never really asked you this before, but I'm curious like what your thoughts are, because I mean, I've personally, I think you get what I'm saying, but I've personally grown up with like people being like, oh man, it's like people that smoke and they do drugs, and then there's the other side of it where people are like I remember when I left high school, I've talked about this time and time again, where it was like some football coach, like the last or second to last day of high school, like walked in and just literally like hovered over me and was like, you're not bringing that to college with you, are you, bro?
Oh no.
And it was just like that was just like the peak of like, ignorance for me, to hear someone just like totally shoot it down, not even be like, hey man, how long you been skating, or nothing. So I don't know. I just want to hear your experience with it.
Yeah, I think the good news is that we're starting to see that change, which is really good. So
you say starting, like you talking about like in the last few years?
Yeah, absolutely. Skateboarding in the Olympics, which I think was a big thing for people to understand that skateboarding, more than just a lifestyle. It can be a sport.
Yeah.
Some people might disagree with that.
Can I interject real quick?
By all means, yeah.
Okay. On Instagram, when it has like interests, there's basketball, soccer, football. There's like literally every sport.
I've noticed that.
And skateboarding is not on there. Shame on you, Instagram.
I've noticed that. Instagram, if you're watching, what's up, dude?
What's up?
Apple has a skateboard emoji. What's up with that? We'll run it up to Zucks. Yeah. So.
But continue. So you were saying it became more of a sport.
Yeah. So I mean, the good news is that I think it's headed in the right direction, because you're starting to see more and more people who might have been, for lack of a better word, sort of marginalized or isolated. And this is also to highlight the fact that they have been already probably participating in skateboarding, but there really wasn't a spotlight on them.
Fair.
More specifically, women's skateboarding has gotten crazy. Did you see like Street League Chicago?
Dude, I will repeatedly get shit on the internet, and we should talk about this.
Yeah.
I repeatedly get shit on the internet for even like batting an eye to talk about women's skateboarding. Like, and I've also seen a lot of like transphobic opinions in the skateboarding community.
Right.
So I think it's so like over time it's been such like a male dominated space.
Right.
In a sense of how it's portrayed.
Right.
Because like obviously there's a ton of women skaters out there.
Agreed.
But I think when you look at it in the grand perspective, like you search skateboarding on YouTube, you're not just going to find all these women skaters. Like 9 out of 10 of those things you're going to see are going to be men. And that's just kind of how it is.
Right.
But I just think it's weird that there was a video, I'll never forget this, like where in the middle of it I said something along the lines of like kind of what we're talking about now, where it's like women's skateboarding doesn't really get too much attention out there. And there's just the most guys in the comments being like, bro, I had to unsubscribe. Bro, why do you even bring up women in skating? Like, they're not even as good as men. Just be honest. And it was like, that's not the conversation.
It's sort of missing the point. It's not about the level of skateboarding. I think part of it, which again is a whole other conversation by itself, which is clearly getting better. But I will say that skateboarding, at least to me, when I've been in it, has always been very inclusive, and that you need to be mindful. And the key word here is skateboarders that I've grown up with. I know that not everyone always shares this, but at least in my experience, the key word here is tolerance.
Yeah.
And meeting people where they are.
Yeah.
And there's just certain things that you can't always change, right? You can't really do much about, how you're born, the way you look, the gender, and again, skateboarding to me, at least as far as I've been, you want to be able to have room for everybody. So I think again, as it goes is like for women's skateboarding, again, you want to be able to be tolerant to have that room, because again, if the goal of course is to continue to sort of spread the stoke of skateboarding, we need to be non-biased in who that goes to. And skateboarding as a lifestyle, dude, we want to plant as many seeds as possible to get as many people stoked as possible, because who knows if what if the greatest skateboarder of all time revered happens to be a lady? That's a controversial question, who knows? But again, we're not doing ourselves any favors by closing off and gatekeeping. The worst trend I've ever seen in anything is gatekeeping. Because if you want to preserve skateboarding as an industry, as a sport, a lifestyle, a culture, you need to let everybody in. And if there's anything that I've learned, you've ever been to a skate park before, the people who are passionate about it will also kind of continue to monitor bad actors. They will self-sustain it itself. So if people who are being intolerant, being weird about it, that over time will generally sort itself out, because the people who have good intentions within skateboarding, regardless of your demographic, where you start, your skill level, any of that doesn't matter. If you want to come to the table and you want to enjoy your experience and make it positive for others, there's always room for you. Period.
100%. There's always, and I think it's funny because as we've moved on as a society, and it sounds general saying this, but it's we've seen people becoming more accepting over time, but I think it's I think that's more of a real life thing, because I feel on the internet there's just a lot of rage type or whatever it's called, people just want to go on the internet and rage at stuff, and it's really hard, because I don't think there's a way, as much as you and I can sit here and talk about it, which I want to, but I don't think that it's gonna be hard. I am a firm believer in the fact that people can change.
Agreed.
And they just need to get another side to it, another they need to hear out more people and more voices in the community.
Yeah.
But it what sucks is that it's some of the coolest people I've ever met in skating are literally women, straight up. And I'm not just saying that to be oh man, I literally mean that. Yeah. And I think that's an issue right there, is that people think that I say that to be oh man, you should now pay attention to women more. And it's no.
Yeah.
It's no, that's just what it is. That's just what it is.
To kind of expand on that, or just to zoom out on that, I think, again, this kind of comes back to letting everybody in, because you need to have different perspectives, and you're not doing yourself a benefit by excluding people just because of who they are. It never leads anywhere good in the short term or long term. And and again, this also comes back to the fact and the idea that I understand things can be polarizing outside of skateboarding, but skateboarding has kind of served as a pretty good poster child and microcosm of how being tolerant, changing your mind, is a superpower. And understanding the fact that, hey, I might have been a little bit misguided before. I've kind of changed my stance on that. Again, we don't need to be combative. We can still disagree on certain things, because everyone has, again, it comes back to what we said earlier, the values. That's a big thing. But again, I always, when you kind of lead a little bit with a lens of empathy of well, what if I was, identified as a woman and I was just as interested in skateboarding as I am now?
Right.
What, how does that look to me from a community that's already sort of, if it were to be a little bit combative, how do I enter into this space and feel hey, am I a trailblazer and I'm going to do it anyway because I love it so much? Or has it helped me facilitate, coming in because I've had an awesome group of people and friends that have welcomed me in, which have made me love this even more.
Right.
So you need to understand that if you switch roles and you understand hey, if I literally walk in their shoes with a little bit of empathy, how would I actually feel?
I think that's really hard for a lot of people to see, Because until they're literally in someone else's shoes or in someone else's spot, or it's literally happening to them, then it's kind of like a wake up, like uh-oh. And it's, I'm not gonna sit here and act like I'm perfect. I've had those experiences myself too, where it's like I didn't think something was one way, and then suddenly I'm in the situation, and it's like, whoa.
And you won't know because, and to be devil's advocate, I understand the difficulty of it because we kind of unfortunately live in a little bit of a bubble sometimes because especially coming off a pandemic, I know for myself this has happened. I've kind of caught myself in sort of kind of a closed-minded spot, especially when people who have all they can do just to get through the day with their routines, you're stuck on your phone, you're getting fed information that may be outdated to you. So it requires extra momentum and effort for you to change that trajectory. You need to be
100%. And I'll even say this. I don't even think I've mentioned this before, but I remember getting personally freaked out or feeling weird about because I've just not been too into pop culture and the internet and just it's COVID. We were locked in our houses, so I wasn't even talking to many people.
Oh yeah.
And for the first time during COVID, it's gonna sound real ignorant, but I was then opened up to hearing different people's pronouns other than she and him.
Yeah.
And that was literally the first time I was open to that. And first, when people were they, them, and they were, and then there was a couple other ones I was hearing, I was even kind of wait, what is that? I was no, it's he or him, and I wasn't even open to they or them until I started to do more research and I started to talk to more people and more people around me, and they were they, them is what people like to be identified as.
Right.
And it took me, I want to say a week or two to be you know what I mean?
And, But see, that's a good example of understanding that you're meeting people where they are.
Yeah.
And that you're not, the way that you've gotten there is that you just, and again, no fault of your own, you've just had preconditioning leading up to that moment that, the world has changed. We're giving more visibility to people who may not have had the lexicon or the language to navigate, right? And now that's been more prominent with, again, gender fluidity and just pronouns and just how people want to be identified as, as long as you're coming with it and the fact that now that you've learned, you're more tolerant of it. But you've already done it without even realizing it, that you've understood empathy. And again, I think skateboarding really leads the charge on that in just understanding that we have room for everybody, whether men, women, non-binary, transgender, just everybody's in and everybody is welcome. And again, as we continue to move down that path, we'll get more used to as far as the lexicon, because it still is generally rather new.
It is.
But skateboarding has always been a trendsetter and has always attracted people who may not have felt like they fit in anywhere else, because it can be whatever it is. And so we want to make sure that we continue to cultivate and we have people that have these conversations to continue to welcome more people in.
Oh, fair, 100%.
Yeah, so again, because what I don't want to do is be a part of a community that is excluding people, like I said, coming back to that gatekeeping, it doesn't do anybody any favors at all. And to be honest, man, if you have a vision for skateboarding and maybe that doesn't include some people, I guess that's your opinion, but you don't need to broadcast it to everyone else. You can just, I guess, stay in your own lane and be solo, I suppose. But again,
it's gonna get weird.
It's gonna get weird. So I mean, part of the benefits of skateboarding has been bringing in people I would have otherwise had no other opportunity of meeting, because this also comes back to what you talked about of skateboarding funneling into multifaceted individuals, which I think attract creatives like yourself that are into, cinematography, art, music, which again is what feeds into your direct career path.
I think it's crazy. I mean, there's that aspect of it, and then the other side of it too is and this is something that was talked about in the documentary that Bing Liu made.
Yes.
Where it was that is the one thing that brings a lot of skaters together unintentionally. I'm not going to include myself in this, and other people in the community I've seen this in, but like there's a lot of like crazy things that happen in a lot of like the people that we hang out with's lives.
Right.
That just like that there was like something that like it was like the end all be all that happened to them, and then they just were like, you know what, skateboarding is the thing that's gonna save me or whatever. And I think that is what's interesting about skating, to tell you the truth, is like there's so many times when we just go to the skate park and we don't even know what the hell happened. Like we could just go to the skate park and see like our homie there and just be rolling around like week after week, and then like all of a sudden like you don't even know like what's happening in their life. Like they might have been, you know, I don't know what their crazy situation was, but we don't even talk about that at the skate park really. Every now and then when you get a little bit closer to somebody, you kind of have the conversation, then you're kind of like, oh damn, and you start realizing that like people in the skate community are very unique in that sense, and it's cool that we bond over that one thing that keeps us going. And I guess this is something that I always talk about too, as far as keeping us going, is it's the mindset you have when you skate. It's, you know, you fall, you gotta get back up. And that's like the thing that I use to like keep going with other things. Like if it weren't for skating, I don't know, like I'm pretty bad at dealing with stuff sometimes, but then when I really think about it, I'm like, all right, I'm like, you've literally taken a fall, like scratched your back up. Like I've luckily never broken any bones. I don't know how. Have you broken bones from it? Yeah. So it's crazy, but you know, here you are. You're in one piece right now.
Generally,
he's generally in one piece. And so it's crazy that like you can take spills and skating, like get yourself back up and get going again. I think that is like the true like main takeaway from skating for me at the end of the day. It's like I said back at the beginning, it's the perspective and it's like the community that kind of is like, you know, I'm age 27. How old are you right now?
Oh, man. Should I give it away?
You want to give it away?
31.
He's 31, and it's like, that's cool that you're skating. You know what I mean? It's cool.
Well, yeah, you know, and again, I think a lot of people, you know, really in general, again, because you hear the cliches a lot, right? Like, oh, you know, skateboarding taught me perseverance, and generally that is true. But when you really dive into the details, it just applies to every other aspect of your life. You cultivate it through the activity of skating.
Yeah.
And the benefit is that you grow up with people who have like-minded mindsets. I mean, take this one to the bank, man. It really is. You really are the general amount of the people that you hang around.
Yeah.
Because you get influenced by the people that you spend the most time with. And if you're hanging out with skateboarders that are pushing each other to like say, hey, let's all get better at skating. Oh, dude, you got it next try. There's definitely tricks I would not have tried by myself. Like, you know, it's like, hey man, I got $5 on the line to get it on film this try. Let's go. Like, you know, but like that's an attitude of optimism and confidence that for a lot of people maybe starting, you know, in anything, not just skateboarding,
they don't have. You
have a community plus a fun activity that is forcing you to get out of your comfort zone.
True.
Which again starts really showing you have that potential with anything. And if you can apply that to anything, especially when you're around creative individuals who are into art, music, cinematography, you know, just really anything, that attitude carries over literally in every aspect of your life. And you cultivate it through skateboarding.
100%.
And so whether that's in your career, it's, you know, with your, you know, you have friends that, we might have met initially and the bonding link is through skateboarding. You don't have to take with you any of that prior baggage. You can keep that at the door. You are equal within that skate park. And you can, you know, is everyone going to be your best friend? Maybe not, but there is a mutual respect there.
No matter
what.
There is. Yeah.
You know, and, you know, it's one of those situations that, again, that respect, that, you know, that mutual understanding, that the fact that you're out here pushing yourself, you know, I mean, maybe people at the gym can say the same thing, right? Like, there's a level of effort that you took that regardless of whatever previous story you had, you are not a prisoner to that story.
Right.
And skateboarding, again, whether it's an escape, whether it might be temporary, it's something that you can work towards to use that as a catalyst to spread to other aspects and effort in your life.
Bam, you are nailing it with that segue. Look at that. Woo! That's a 10 out of 10 segue right there. I was going to ask you, because you know, talked about going into other aspects of your life. So you mentioned that, you went from skating and now you're obviously, as you grow up, our schedules change and
Sure.
work and life and
Right.
all that. So I want to ask you about, when was the first time that you really felt you had to find a balance with skating? Because, I mean, for me, it was like I started to grow my business, and then I was like, okay, like, it was like skating 50, business 50, skating,
Yeah.
and then it was like, all of a sudden it would kind of one day be like skating 70, business 30, and then all of a sudden it would like flip-flop, and all of a sudden, wait a minute, no, business 70, skating 30,
Right.
and then now it's like business 95, skating
5, yeah.
It's like, but I want to ask you, like, as time has gone on for you, what has that, like, transition been like?
Yeah, I mean,
Can you recall a certain point?
yeah, I think anybody who's at the point of responsibility in their life, maybe post-college or any of that stuff here, I mean, I always want to preface it by saying, for any young person, and really anybody, it's generally, let's call the elephant out in the room. It's tough to balance current obligations.
Fair.
With any sort of quote-unquote recreational activity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, again, I don't know if there was a particular point, maybe a series of points, since I've had quite a numerous amount of different jobs leading up to this. Obviously, I think it was really pronounced when I moved out to California.
Wow.
I
didn't know that.
Yeah, and that was about probably, because again, you sort of leave the safety net, right? And so the benefit, though, and again, bringing in a little bit of segue of what we talked about, at least the mindset with skateboarding, knowing like, okay, well, now you really have to figure out, a way to make a living.
Right.
You have rent to pay. Even if you're kind of doing
it, are all a bunch of losers.
Yeah.
They don't make any money.
Right.
Just
no.
kidding. It's a lie. Don't listen to that one.
Don't listen to that one. That's not, no. But yeah, there's a work ethic that develops through skateboarding, and I think there's like a switch that turns on in your brain that says, well, hey, if I've made the effort to make the move to, for lack of a better word, I guess the promised land or the West Coast, I moved there for opportunity, of course, like for any skateboarder who wants to be around talent, who wants to be around a culture that it's born there, and just opportunity for the career. I mean, the worst case scenario is, hey, it's like you can always come back home, right?
Fair.
And so just that was 5.5 years ago, and I've been lucky enough that I've had people beyond myself that have given me chances, whether it be family and friends, and you can't always predict what's going to happen, but you do need to put yourself in the path of opportunity. So I think to answer your question, how my balance has been, skateboarding's always been an anchor in my life no matter what. I always kind of put the obligations first, but I would always try to find time, whether it be unideal, maybe at night, whatever. If you're too tired from a long shift or a long day, totally understand, you do have to rest. But when it came to like a day off or a weekend, I'm probably skating. And I think, again, because it very much, especially at this point in my life, it's very much a use it or lose it. You need to work harder to make sure, and again, it does test sort of your passion to it. Like, you have every reason in the world to just sit down on the couch and relax the day. And, I got this, I got that. And I think the key here is making the priority to understand that if you don't make the time for it, that's how it happens. That's how, I haven't skated in 6 months, 7, of course, barring any injuries, any sort of physical ailments, right? If it's important to you, you will find the time to do it, even if it's, before work, a morning session, sure. After work, sure. And obviously in California, there's resources there. There's plenty of, parks and places to go that have lights after work, so on and so forth. But, and I get it. There's definitely been days where I've woken up and I'm like, yep, not today. Like, I get it. It's all right. But give yourself the permission to understand, like, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But I think, again, if you have a deep love for anything, you will find a way to make it happen. Is it better with friends? Sure. But if it's a mission to say, hey, I'm going to go to this park, and even if I had the worst session of my life, you've made the effort, because more than half of it is showing up.
True.
So, and that goes with anything in life.
It goes with everything.
Yep.
And that's actually a good segue. You talk about showing up, and that's a huge concept, is like showing up for yourself, really.
Right.
And having said that, so you're 24/7 showing up for yourself.
I try to.
And what do you do for work exactly? I mean, because it's a lot of people that I have on this podcast in particular are like, I feel like I tend to have like a lot of artists that make music, and then they also work like they'll work like another job, or if they're also, maybe they also make video, or maybe they do, you know what I mean, like different things like that. But it's not very often that I like speak to people on here that have like that work, you know, especially out in California right now, and then work a 9-to-5 job. So yeah, what do you do out there for your what is your job right now?
So my current gig, I work in customer account management. So it's, you know, I guess it took me a little bit longer to come around since I've worked many of odd jobs prior to that, making the move to California. But this was my
your odd jobs. I mean, you worked at Apple for a while.
Yeah, I worked at Apple for a while.
That was cool.
Retail was fun. I really enjoyed that job.
What was it before that?
Before that, oh god, you know, actually, I got lucky. I got very lucky that when I moved out to California, Apple kind of gave me a chance. So I'd been there pretty much up until about a year ago. And that really was a segue and a catalyst for a lot of other, you know, side opportunities, you know, working for, you know, sustainable clothing brands. And then, you know, right now I'm currently, you know, working for an EV startup.
Was that an opportunity that popped up through people you know, or was that something that you were like wanting to do from the jump?
You know, this comes back to kind of the topic that we talked about earlier. You just got to put yourself in the path of opportunity, and part of that again comes back to that concept of just showing up, and quite frankly, it was pretty serendipitous. You know, I was very, I had a place to crash with family, but, you know, at that point, my family, you know, like my cousin who I was going to crash with, you know, she had her whole 9-to-5 career ready to go, and I'm coming out with nothing. So, like, I had a place to crash, and that was about it. So I think there was something in me as far as a work ethic, coming back to what, you know, we talked about earlier with skateboarding, developing that work ethic. I knew that I needed to be able to not be picky, to take something, to take anything, because if you need to also earn the right. If you want it bad enough, you'll figure out a way to do it. Oddly enough, you know, I found myself online one day and shot a message to a recruiter that happened to be from Apple, and you know, it was kind of a running joke. You know, once I got into Apple, like, you got in by how? That's weird. Okay, all right. Like, but again, I found that experience led me to another experience, and led me to another experience that made, you know, again, there's just no way that you could possibly plan for it. But I think it helped me not only gain a foundation to my move in California, but gave me the skills that are to where I'm at now. You know, and so, you know, again, just like skating, you pick it up because you love it, but you never know the people that you're going to meet, the places it's going to bring you.
I mean, especially in a new freaking state.
Absolutely.
And California, like the most competitive place ever.
Exactly.
It's
so
crazy.
It's, you know, but I think, again, there's something to be said about being in an environment of talent, of people, of different perspectives that you just kind of grow accustomed to. So it's a very natural progression for you learning to be around people who are very good at what they do. And that's kind of like an osmosis, sort of. You're surrounded by people that have that level of talent, so it seems now normal to you.
Right.
That you would have otherwise, maybe, not saying that your current geography is sort of limiting you, especially with the internet. But I think when you're actually there is a level of exposure that you grow accustomed to, that you naturally progress at. You may not notice it, but you just get better and better and better. You just pick up little tidbits that you add to the feather in your cap as you continue to grow your skill set, your mindset, your perspective.
Interesting. So do you think, because that's on a very positive note, but I want to ask you something that's like more like in depth on that.
Sure,
so
of course.
You had said that you originally said that you walked out there and you were like sleeping on a couch. You didn't really have anything.
Yeah.
What was that experience like? Because I feel like not to generalize what you're saying by any means, but I do feel like that is a very classic LA story as it pertains to people moving. Like, it's very few times that I know people that are like, oh man, I left Illinois and I just went right to California and plopped myself in my 9 to 5 and I'm good to go.
Yeah.
Like, it's very few people that I've heard that from.
No.
It's more people that are like, I had to go crash on, I had to go crash in this place and they kicked me out a week later.
Yeah.
Like, I moved here and my homies are moving, so now I'm sleeping in their backyard. Or, you know what I mean? Like, that's the story that I hear. But so I want to ask you, like, what was that like? What did that feel like immediately right out the gates? Because a lot of people wonder this.
Yeah, so I will say that the way that and we have, I think we both have mutual friends out there that had to experience that. So I'd be remiss not to mention them, who they kind of knew that it's now or never. It's never going to be a perfect time. They've definitely, really had to be resourceful, with just current circumstances, like, that were maybe a little bit less than ideal.
Yeah,
so I want to make sure that they get at least the credit that they deserve.
It's resilience.
100%, which
it's
again,
crazy.
I feel like I'm just repeating myself like a dead record here. They would have never been in both skateboarders themselves. That was naturally instilled in them to say, this is what I want to do. This is how I want to do it.
Yeah. It takes so much.
It takes a lot of that. And again, it's never by an ideal circumstance, but I think, again, if skateboarding's taught you anything, if you want it, you'll figure out, like, you can pretty much endure anyhow, and...
Was that how it was for you?
I will say to a lesser extent, sure. Again, I've been very lucky that, like I had mentioned earlier, I luckily enough had family out there. That
how long did it take? What was like the gap? Do you know what I mean?
Well, the gap itself, as far as me kind of getting set up, it kind of was 0 to 60 pretty quick. So, because what I didn't want to do was find myself sort of, floundering around, because again, you have the momentum getting up there, right? And I knew that if I didn't start kind of really revving up, you're gonna have to you run the risk of moving back home the longer it takes.
Right.
So even before I even arrived in California, I was sending out applications, jobs, just really anything to get my foot in the door.
Yeah.
And luckily enough, with Apple in the fruit stand, it's been, I was lucky that opportunity presented itself pretty shortly after I arrived in California.
Wow.
And so that was a really, really, but again, call it serendipitous, call it a higher power, any of that stuff here. There's no way you would have ever predicted that. Right place, right time.
No,
you're right.
No.
But again, out of necessity of, for lack of a better word, survival, you kind of are just like, you'll do anything. You'll accept anything because you have the work ethic instilled in you. It doesn't matter what medium you take. It's a matter of, hey, I'm willing to work here. I'm willing to stay here and earn my right to stay here. There's a work ethic here, that presents itself. And, again, I'm not going to, because what's the alternative? I go back home and I start over? Sure. But I also understand that not everyone has that safety net.
It's not an easy one.
No, it's not. But again, the principles still remain the same despite the circumstance. If you want to do it, you will figure out a way to do it. So I think, again, you build off sort of any opportunities that are presented to you, and you work from there. And again, this also makes me very grateful and appreciative of the fact that I did have those opportunities. So I wasn't going to take them for granted. I wasn't going to squander them. So I think that even put more impetus on me because I didn't want to let anybody down. Does that make sense? Like, just if someone's giving me a place to crash, like, they don't have to do that.
They don't have to, not at all.
They don't have to do that. Even if they were family, they could very much be like, hey, we love you, but no.
You're not entitled.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. So it's, again, just the fact that was able to have an opportunity, you want to be able to sort of show that your effort is worth something. I never wanted to find myself in a scenario where it was from a lack of effort.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
That does.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually a really good segue because one thing that Steve and I are famously talking about, and like, we've literally been skating a spot and then stopped and had this conversation over and over again. And I think it's because I'm so damn online that I talk about creators that I watch all the time.
Right.
And one of the last times Steve and I skated, I was learning more about different creators that he's watching, and I don't think the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I think you have a very like unique mindset as it comes to what we've already been talking about,
Right.
and this isn't like a conversation that I think I have with everybody,
Right.
And so I want to hear more about kind of what got you to have the sort of mindset you do, and maybe was it the creators that you're watching that had an influence on you, and I want to hear some of your takes on this.
I might preface that with a short story, if that helps.
No short stories on this.
Short story,
no. What if I was serious? I was like, nope.
And cut.
No short story.
Yeah, man.
Long stories only.
Long stories only. Yep, every detail. Yeah, man. I think a lot of that, and ironically, from a timing perspective, I think a lot of
How
people.
long? I need all the details.
All the details. How long exactly? Years, months, weeks, down by the day. Yeah.
Minutes? How many minutes?
I think what kind of got, for lack of a better word, sort of the growth mindset, sort of, again, I think that's already kind of naturally defaulted with skateboarders in general.
Mm-hmm.
You might just lack sort of maybe the resources or other voices that can help sort of either redirect or validate that. And I think what I've learned initially is when I was at least when the first couple of years out of college were a little bit humbling, to say the least. A combination of getting fired from my first job about a year in, working a job in the city that was a little bit very stressful, underpaid, just trying to desperate for experience. At that time, I was going through a pretty major breakup as well. So there was a lot of pain and sort of, I would say, the catalyst for growth started for searching for answers out of being unsatisfied where I was.
Fair.
Okay, I think and I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah. I feel like that's pretty.
Yeah, and so
pretty cool.
And I think also the adjustment to adult life, the stark contrast from being in college and just being thrust out into the real world, trying to gain your bearings, trying to figure that out. Like, I think any young person past college, especially even, hats off to any new graduates now. I mean, it's never been easy. It's been harder and harder for a lot of people to sort of find their traction while also trying to find who they are as a person.
And find answers.
Yeah. And again,
you think the internet's a good place for those answers?
I think it is. But I also think you also need to filter out other voices that you can be easily influenced on, because when you're sort of desperate, you're not satisfied, it's very easy to kind of feel like you need to latch onto anything, the first thing that comes to you. I think around that time, to relate to that, I started searching for, I think it started generally in business as far as kind of understanding, like how do entrepreneurs think, or how do this, and you kind of start understanding different modes of, guys like, I started initially with a book called The 4-Hour Workweek through Tim Ferriss. That was probably the first book I picked up that sort of started to get me to think of, there is a different path.
What's a book?
What's a book, right? What's a book? Well, to be fair, it's
2023, we don't read books anymore.
We read audiobooks, right? Yeah, exactly.
Go read books.
Yeah.
It's good for you.
I think that was initially the first book that I think I started with, but that led me to his content for, the people that he had on his podcast. And then again, it sort of segues and sort of monkey bars to other people that are successful in their own right, and whether you follow them or not, again, then that leads to, a couple years down the line, that leads to, guys like Gary Vee. I
have some hot takes on that, man.
I'm sure you do.
I gotta share with you.
Do you want to share, man?
Not right now. Keep going.
Okay, so we'll drop this in. Yeah. But again, you start getting exposed to more of a growth mindset of just understanding that, like, you can be unsatisfied as the catalyst, but wanting to learn more beyond your education, beyond traditional education. Like, don't ever let schooling interfere with your education.
Yeah.
I'm sure many people have heard that one, but it's true because, again, your experiences either validate or redirect sort of your mindset, right? And so validating either by, either a current mindset that you have, either through your own experiences, and that's sort of echoed back from another voice that says, oh, I can't be the only one that thinks this. So if it's someone that you look up to or is successful, that helps validate that. Or if you find yourself in a creator for an idea that you may have never thought of, there's no way you're going to be able to experience it all. So if you found a creator that, said something to the effect that redirects or sort of changes your mindset, great. That's another feather in your cap. Everything is very evolving, right? And so nothing is stuck. So I think, again, leading with the fact that you can change your mind, be exposed to new information. And again, that's going to be more pertinent depending on where you're at in your life stage. It is a very deep topic that will go circles.
It is.
But, again, for just to list a few as far as the creators that I've kind of generally listened to, again, this is not by any means a limit. I mentioned Gary Vee. We'll get to him in a second. But Rich Roll was another one that really, I just love the way he speaks. I love his story of a comeback story, the way he speaks. His podcast is amazing. Andrew Huberman, fellow skateboarder himself, really interested in neuroscience. Lex Friedman I've been starting to get into a little bit more. But again, just people that you start getting exposed to, start introducing you to their new ideas. And even if I don't agree with every idea, again, the key here is exposure and being willing to listen, and either it challenges an idea that you had or something to the effect of, hey, this is something that I've quite honestly never thought of.
Right.
It's something to consider.
And I think it's tough. It's tough because it definitely has its lines. Going off of, you mentioned Gary Vee.
Right.
Have I told you that I've kind of met him in person before?
No, you haven't.
Yeah, so I was with one of my clients and I was in his office.
Oh.
And I didn't even really get to shake his hand, meet him, but I was right there and just it was one of those things. He was hey, how's it going, sort of thing. And he was literally right there. Sure. But it was kind of funny. I having that experience and seeing him in real time, really told me that he's a really cool, down to earth, nice kind of person. Right. And I think where I struggle with his content is just he'll say things in a way that, and I get it, you got to kind of juice yourself up on the internet so that you're more appealing to the average person, so that you're not oh man,
you need a bit of a hard exterior to kind of come in loud. I get it. Yep.
And I think when it comes to social media, he's got in the way that he's phrasing himself, and I don't want to say every video, but in a lot of videos, is more of hey man, you can just get up, get out of your seat, and go get that job right now, sort of and it's the motivational mindset sort of thing. But I think where it's there's a lot of reality checks that he's good at, and he goes over them. He goes over a lot of different realities, but I think it's what I see with his audience and people commenting on it is people that are in very they're in a position where they gotta go, they're working 9 to 5 and they're not,
their obligations are preventing them from moving forward.
Preventing them from moving forward. And they're listening.
Yeah, right, bro.
Yeah.
I get it.
And they're just listening to this guy with all these tropes, and it's well,
it's not that easy, bro.
It's not
you don't
that
understand.
easy.
Yeah.
It's not that easy. And I wish he had more content kind of explaining that
provided practicality.
And I think that's what's missing from his stuff. And it's kind of maybe, I don't know. Maybe I haven't checked in with him in the last year or so. Maybe he's changed.
To his credit, he I think he's picked up on that, and he's been very smart about it.
As of recent?
Yeah.
He's okay.
I think part of it,
I did mute him on Instagram.
Yeah, so that's fair. And I get that. He has a big team around that content strategy as well. And the one thing that I think he does well is that he understands the new, because I know he reads his comments. I know that,
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, when I first saw Gary, and he jokes about this too, I was just like, who is this swearing dude from New York? He's just an East Coast kind of,
yeah, he does.
Bumhead. Just
I kind of like that about him, though. I like that he swears.
Oh, which is great. But he's even been honest about it. He's like, that's just me, though.
He's sworn in a classroom setting.
Which is, he's made, and again, the reason why he's genius, he made a whole content about that. And
There's a bumblebee right there.
Oh, hey, buddy.
Our biggest fan.
Her biggest fan. It's all fuzzy. Save the bees, by the way. What Gary's been really good at is, and I think maybe initially he understands the nuance because he reads the comments. He understands the audience. He understands he's got to reach. And the benefit, the reason why I've come to really enjoy Gary is that he will be honest with you. He'll be honest with you in the sense of, like, if I'm trying to sell you something, I'm going to be very honest because the people that want to buy it will buy it.
Right.
And I think, again, he puts enough free content out there for people who are really, really invested in either building their personal brand. You're not going to please everybody all the time, and he understands that. He gets that. But I think for people who are maybe looking for a way out, there are practical solutions. I think the other thing that he's even come to talk about is you might not like it. You might not like the fact that it requires work, dedication, but I think he's got empathy for people who find themselves in maybe a circumstance that isn't their fault. It's unideal. Hey, I got a mortgage. I've got a family. Yeah, right, bro. Easy for you to say. And again, I think the other thing that needs to be introduced is that not everyone is going out to tell you that you need to make a $2 million business. That's just not what we say.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I'll probably repeat Gary here, but really in general, and I love this about it, I come back to this all the time, self-awareness.
Yeah.
What your values, my values, while similar, there's certainly overlap. Everyone's different. Your experience is uniquely your own.
Yeah.
I think you need to take, there's like at the end of the day, you figuring out what works best for you and being okay with the pushback you might get from family, from this. I get it. The pressure is real.
He does talk about that.
He does talk about that. And,
I've seen that.
And, it would be impossible to have a blanket statement to say, hey, you all need to, be successful, go out and grind. There's 1,000,002 motivators that are shouting into a microphone that I'll be honest, I'm sure most people are probably sick and tired of, let's be honest. Because of course, and of course, if you go to your page, of course you're selling a course. Yeah. Right? I get it. Here's another quote that I'll take. It's not my own, from one of Tim Ferriss's podcasts. I love this one from Derek Sivers. If more information was the answer, we'd all be millionaires and have six-pack abs. Yeah. You do not need more information.
You don't. No.
The key is understanding that when you're consuming content, there's a limit. There's only even this one. This is not an exception. Yeah. That you need to take the time to understand what does that mean to you. What's a small step you can do today? Yeah. What's a small step you can do tomorrow? And then the third day, that next week. And showing up, you build the habits, you build the credibility by showing up for yourself. True. And that can mean a million different things for other people. In Gary's sense, is it flip life? Is it going to garage sales? Like what? It's sort of jettisoning what others think of you, because more than likely that's probably what is holding you back. And I get it.
You know what he caught a lot of flack for? So I actually do find the garage sale stuff very interesting. Right. I did watch a lot of that stuff. I do like the people that, like, there's a video of someone like pretending to be him at garage sales on the internet. Right. Cracks me up every time. Or like his impersonators. Stuff cracks me up. I will like die laughing over that. Oh man,
but, like was it the Nima guy?
Nima Nez.
Have you ever thought about making heaven into an NFT?
Yeah,
I was
so
losing it. And Gary's even gone on record by saying it's so
He's
funny.
been with them. He's been on stage with them.
The best.
And it's, I do think it's funny because he there's that side of it, right? There's like the goofy, you can look at it in that light. But the thing that also drives me nuts about him is like, whenever I see a fad on the internet and I know it's a fad, just right out the gates, I know it. Like, for instance, NFTs. When was the last time you heard someone today being like, hey, Steve, what's good with NFTs? It's like you might have heard that like once or twice over the last month. Like, there was a point in time where it was like every day people are like, oh, you see the monkey NFT? You see this NFT? Oh, you see the, alligator NFT? And it's like the thing that drove me crazy about him was like, he was drawing like this little worm. And then he's like, if you get this worm for $12,000, you can have a private dining experience with Gary Vee. Or I think it was a bluegill. If you got his bluegill, you have a dining experience. And that just drove me insane. That was one of the moments of like things I was checking off. I was like, all right, give this guy one more thing, and then I gotta mute him. Yeah. And that was like the final straw for me. Sure. And I know that's narrow-minded to say because I don't want to like totally block someone out for that. But he was juicing up NFTs so hard that like other people were even being like, yo, what's up with this? Right. Like, and I get it. I get it from a business perspective. Like that's, your audience. But what sucks is like seeing him try to sell these NFTs to an audience that is just looking up to him to try to, grow their own business. And I've seen a very unique experience with a woman trying to start her own business with her writing. Mm-hmm. And she wrote a book, and she got, this information from Gary and was able to take this and go and, she created her own platform, and Gary shared her work, and, she got juiced up. And so I've seen good things. Mm-hmm. But man, it was that NFT thing. I just couldn't shake it. And that might be a hot take. I don't know. Maybe you agree with him on that, and maybe you see his side of it. But that's something I was like,
well, it's interesting because not that I'm, I'm not like angelic to any one creator. I think also people make mistakes too, but I also understand only just because I happen to remember content that he had talked about, that he had made it a video, just because he puts so much content out, it's pretty easy to miss. Mm-hmm. But I do remember specifically on the topic of that he talked about, a lot of the NFTs are going to crash, and he called it 100. It's exactly what happened, but he called it in the sense that and it almost seems like oxymoronish, right? Like in the sense of paradoxical of like, okay, well, if it's gonna crash, then why are you selling this?
He juiced it hard at the beginning. He was like, NFTs, that's the new thing. You gotta buy it, and you gotta get them now. NFTs.
And so here's the other thing that I would say too is, he's even talked about his personal L's as far as his career.
Yeah.
Like I think he invested in Vidster, which nobody even remembers. It was barely a blip on the map. Mm-hmm. He's not right all the time. And I think this one might have been a dice roll for him. I don't think anyone, and understandable because it had its merit for sure. There's definitely certain things, at least within snowboarding. I bought a couple NFTs personally, and I haven't used them since, but I got them. That's fine. But but the one thing that he is correct on that I do think will likely be revisited, since everything is a remix. It's not really the NFT itself, but it's the access that it gives you. And I think I think people were buying it because yes, it was a fad. But I think it's going to come in a different way somewhere down the line where it becomes sort of beneficial. Mm-hmm. Because you have to think, where is everything going digital? You talk about AI now, which is a whole nother conversation.
I already had that conversation on another podcast I just filmed.
Yeah, which we won't get into just yet. But again, there's a lot of changes happening, so you're not gonna hit a bullseye every time.
Fair.
And so I think, for anybody that's at least within the space, is active in the space, taking in his content, and even beyond Gary, just it always comes back to personal decision making. If you're just blindly following everything, use your own judgment. Comes back to self-awareness.
I think that was where my problem came in with it, though, because, I don't want to say that all of his... I see a lot of his community. Like, there's been times where I've interacted in his Discord community, and so much so that people have taken on their own limb to come out of the Discord community from him and say, hey, man, I saw your username in the thing. I found you on Instagram, and now they try to be their own Gary Vee to me. And then they're like, yo, I'm an inspirational speaker. I can this and that. And they try to, sell me on their thing. And I'm like, dog, you're just, the Gary Vee repeat. This is not something that's happened, once. This is, maybe, 5-6 times this has happened. And it's okay. It's chill out a little bit. But I've also seen people in this community that a lot of them are just looking like, I don't think they walk into the community with the Gary Vee mindset. They think, oh man, this guy's maybe got some answers for me. And that's kind of where, like, that, again, back to what I started by saying, that's kind of where I took the issue to begin with.
Yeah.
Because, like...
That you're taking parts of people who may be vulnerable and sort of, unfortunately, maybe
capitalizing
inadvertently
off of it.
capitalizing off that.
And those people can't do shit about it, but they're paying... It's like, why'd you pay to go to his $50 event? You could have put the $50 into your course or whatever. And they're the same people that are out here being like, Gary, but I don't have any money.
Yeah.
And they're attending maybe his event's like $150. How about you don't go to Gary's event and you just put that $150 into something towards your business instead of being broke after Gary's event.
It's fair. I think the other thing I'd also say, this kind of comes back to, and again, this isn't to sort of shift any sort of focus off Gary, but I'd also say, like, beyond that, I think everyone has a choice, and I think sort of Gary's sort of mindset would be, and really my mindset, like, the market will decide either way. Yeah. And so, like, and again, it's never, and especially when you're starting out, it's not going to be easy. Things take time. I think there's enough sort of free resources for most people, especially if you have an iPhone, Instagram. Like the bare reality is that, and again, this is a bit of a stark contrast, but it is true. If you have an iPhone, you have an internet connection, if you're really smart, and the key word here is discerning, and you can sort of filter out what works and what doesn't for your circumstances. Right. It is impossible. Gary wouldn't be able to tell you that. I can't tell you that. Yeah. You can't tell him that. You need to make the best decision with what you have at the time, and if it ends up being an L, that's okay. Yeah. It's okay. It's going to happen. Like, because...
Can't win every time.
You can't win every time. Win them all. You will never know the alternative. So because you have to, it's better for you to decide. It is almost easier for you to come back from a mistake and decide and make the wrong decision than make no decision at all.
Correct.
Like that is in business and anything. That is how that works. It is better for you. And unfortunately, like I found myself having inaction, and that's costed me. The cost of inaction is still a decision. And it's generally the most expensive one. Right.
And have you had do you think you've been overly influenced by, because I was originally started by asking about like influencers you watch, and you scratched on, the quote that you had from reading, you were talking about Gary Vee a little bit. Through any of these people that you watch, have you taken something from it and then all of a sudden been like, oh shoot, I kind of was like a little bit over influenced by this, or maybe not even that, maybe you watched it and then later on you had another experience where you were like, you know what, maybe this guy wasn't right, maybe I should take it like this instead of that.
Yeah, and I hate to...
Is there a specific example?
I feel like I'm grilling Gary a lot. Sorry, buddy.
No, he's like I said, I started from saying that in the jump. Yeah. Very, very cool individual. He's you meet him in person, he's great. He's a good guy all around. I'm not knocking. I'm just, there's my white guy 10 cents on his. Yeah, but yeah, go ahead.
But I would say I started moving away from him in the sense that I started finding other creators that spoke more to nuance, if that makes sense. Yeah. And I understand Gary's position in the sense that when you have that level of reach, it's hard to get that specific. He is very, from a personality standpoint, very direct, very blunt, he moves quick. Not for everybody. I think, again, that's good as far as the overarching concept, but I think, again, to your point, you get the "yeah, right, bro" comments. Yeah. What they're searching for is context, nuance. Yeah. Slow it down. Yeah. Like, what are the actual steps? That, I'm going to name another creator, Impact Theory, Tom Billy was very good at that. He really gets into the grit of, understanding, like, okay, like, what are the actual practical steps? Like, let's physically break this down. Like, to the point where it's like, it's more detailed than you could ever hope to have as far as taking the first step. Again, that boils, especially if you're also looking for something a little bit more abstract from a comeback story. Again, I say Rich Roll is a great one. because these are normal people that had normal careers and normal issues that a lot of people experience
that they can relate to,
that you can relate to, that you've grown into overcoming just sheer adversity. You know, and again, I think, again, I've kind of shifted away more, you know, I started taking less of his content because I found other creators that sort of fell into what I value and that have been more pertinent to my situation. And again, that's going to be different for everybody, but I would encourage people to, you know, be willing to seek that out, be willing to sort of, you know, don't spend all day on Instagram, that's for sure. Definitely like go outside, go about your day, you know, take your goal. Because there is such a thing as over consuming.
That's what I was talking about.
You know, and again, you know, there, even a lot of creators will say like, you know, just go execute, but what does that look like, right? Well, I think the first step is, hey,
it looks like buying their training package for $650 a month.
Yeah. So if anyone,
and you'll have all the answers.
Yeah. If anyone is trying to sell you anything, I would encourage you to question. It's okay to question their credibility, especially if they're loud. And so, you know, and again, for people that maybe are in a situation, whatever that circumstance might be, that is, you can do all that you can just to keep a roof over your head, just to rub two nickels together, like a really dire situation, and having empathy for those people.
Fair.
If you're able to view that, again, I often would even tell you that even those influencers might be a catalyst, but do not look at them as a demigod. Do not look at them as a demagogue. Like, don't, you know, that might be at least the, for lack of a better word, inspiration porn that might kind of get you in your feels at the time.
100%.
But the key here is also understanding what are the actual first steps? So if it's, for most people, if it's lack of funds, lack of money, great. Okay, what can I do right now, even just to make 5, 10? Hey, you know, if I have an iPhone or an internet connection and I'm probably watching this, do I have access to eBay? Can I put this on eBay? So, like, again, it will be impossible for you to see where you end up, but I think where initially the key here is momentum. Getting over the initial inertia is the hardest part, but once you get past the first day, the second day is a little easier. Get past the second day, again, this comes back to skateboarding, just showing up, persistence, an unwillingness to quit. You can still be in pain and be bruised and just be in the worst pain, but if you give yourself the bright lines, this is from Tom Brillieu, you give yourself the bright lines in your life that under no circumstance, take out a pen, take out a paper, write it down. Under no circumstance will I do this ever. Like, you now start giving yourself some guidelines to say, I'm no longer aimlessly sort of just trying to get to the next day. You give yourself a hard, firm guideline that when you show up and you meet that guideline, you build credibility with yourself. When you build credibility with yourself, you build confidence. When you build confidence, that's how that takes shape, right? Comes back to what I said earlier. You don't just stumble into a passion, you feed it. It's a fire. Starts off as a spark gets an ember, you start blowing on it, you give it oxygen, the ember turns into a flame, then it starts getting into you get what you feed into it.
And I think that in it of itself is something that needs to be talked about more, because especially with how when COVID was a thing, I feel like that was a point where I personally, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I personally saw some people that I know just like overnight just be like, I'm this. Just like, and good, cool, be that. But what I do see now is like the aftermath of those people that were like, I'm this. And then they're over here like, why isn't it like that for me now? And it's like, well, dog, I was talking to you a year ago. I'm like, I'm a whole 8 years into this. Like, I didn't just, blink my eye, and the next year, everyone knows me. You know, like, that's where I feel like there was a disconnect. I personally know some people that kind of actually hit them, like, right in the face, and they're like, I got to let go of this thing, I got to do something else now. And it's like, that's something, comes back to what you were saying, is like, it takes time. It takes that, like, motivation, takes that resilience, takes that effort, that's how you're even just treating other people around you, and that's like I feel like that's a lost art.
I agree.
In and of itself, just like what people like remember you by, and how they feel around you too, in general, outside of just being this like this business guy or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
people remember you for who you are, and it takes time. They don't just, oh man, just because we saw that guy over there, hitting a ball over there and might have said hi or whatever. I'm not just like, oh man, that's the nicest guy ever.
To that point, and again, I feel like, guys like Gary have also like talked about this too, but it really is, it boils down and sort of weeds out people who, do you enjoy the process, right? Like, what are you getting out of it? Like, if you're putting money at the forefront of it, like, might not always be the motivator, because you will burn out for sure. And again, I know things move fast with the internet, as they should, but again, it's more of, you have to look at it from a lens of, I'm going to, enjoy the process of learning it, trying it, saying that I've built credibility with myself, that I gave it an honest effort. Are there going to be days where you're just like, dude, I've put money into this. I've actually lost money into this business venture, and I've gained nothing from it. It's up to you. Again, if that's an insight that you've learned, that this is stressful for you, if this is something that isn't working, be willing to pivot. Give yourself some grace and permission to be like, hey, I tried it this way. It didn't work. Let me sit back and reflect. It's okay. There's nobody holding a gun to your head to doing this. I think a lot of people, unfortunately, are motivated by the wrong things, by pressure, by external pressure, by family. And those are all real things. They're very real things. Hey, when you get married, when you're doing this, oh, you're working that art job?
We talk about this all the time.
Yep.
That is what I was trying to talk about.
And I agree. There's a lot. We are motivated by the social external pressures, by people who we care about most. And I think a lot of times, oftentimes, for many people, that often ends up being at odds with what you truly want to do. Even if you have no idea, even if it's just this constant idea that you keep coming back to, and who knows, maybe you pursue it and it ends up not being what you had envisioned in your head. Great. You can say you've done it, right? And so, for anybody who's out there, like, it is a skill, it is a muscle. I feel you. It's something I try to battle every day, like, especially when everyone around you feels like they're doing the same thing. Like, oh, you got hitched, great, that's awesome. Hey, you got, like, you want to be happy for them, but you feel overwhelmingly compelled to join the same crew just so you have something to talk about when you do meet up. And I think, again, the problem with social is that we've sort of seen highlights, and that it feels, we like the verb of doing. We like, you
don't see the deleted scenes.
Right. We like going to the wedding. We like going on vacation. We like
I don't like going to the wedding unless it's a close friend.
Fair enough. That's valid. But everything is an action verb. It's a verb that we like. Social media highlights the doing. We like going to the wedding, going on vacation, going to that destination spot. But then there's, you don't always see the glamorous, oh, we got delayed for an hour. Hey, the reception cost $40,000. Like, it's, again, I'm not saying everyone is like that, but again, there's it lacks nuance. It lacks nuance. And I think, again, that can sort of give the illusion that other people are falling behind in life. And I think the elephant in the room, again, consistently, when you are comparing yourself, you're seeing snippets, you're seeing the highlight reels. Every single person has some challenge that they're facing. They're all valid. Everyone's on varying degrees. But again, you comparing yourself to that really generally isn't a good mindset to be in. So please do yourself a favor, especially being that it is Mental Health Awareness Month. Take the time, give yourself the grace. You are doing much better than you give yourself credit for.
True.
And it's okay to log off. It's okay to not compare. It's okay to say, this has been my biggest success today, and that's okay, and that's enough for me. I think really saying it out loud and really hearing someone else say it is a big catalyst for people, because they do, not everyone has money to, quality therapy. It's expensive, or healthcare, or any of that stuff. And that's a whole nother discussion we won't get into here. But again, there's a lot of undue pressure for people to just randomly perform under pressure, and doing your best is going to look different each day. Again, coming back to the fact that if you can give yourself enough strength and grace just to show up every day, even if it took every ounce of strength, that's enough.
Yeah.
It's okay. And you're doing better than you think you can. And I think having more people hear that message again and again and again, at least really lay a good foundation for them to kind of step up from whatever, challenge that they're facing.
100, man. I don't even know if I have any words to that. That was a banger. That was
that
good.
In the highlight reel.
That was good. Yeah, I mean, and I guess that all comes back to the original thing that you said, which was societal pressures, right? And I do think we're in a, you and I, maybe it's me, and maybe not, maybe you can relate to, but I do think, like, particularly at least my generation, and let me know if yours too, is like comes from a space of like we're kind of changing as times are going, especially as it relates to like, it's like I'm starting to see literally more jobs, and I even read a whole article on it the other day. Jobs don't even require a college degree. You know what I'm saying? Like, stuff is shifting like that. And it's like, before it was like, college degree, when you can get it, if you don't have that degree, no job. And like, we're starting to see a shift in that now. Or like, people having like different side hustles and a job. Or maybe they just do side hustles. Or maybe they're just, doing e-commerce or something like that. Where it's like, people have different jobs. And we're in a space now where it's like, I can't walk up to that guy that was sitting there, in that generation and be like, I'm doing this. He'd look at me funky. He'd be like, damn, bro, like, what the fuck is your issue? Yeah. Like, but we're in a generation now where it's like, you're kind of getting like the generation after us to kind of look at that and go, I think I'm starting to get it. I'm starting to get it. So it makes me wonder, going off of that, do you think that the societal pressures going forward will be the same? Because like, personally speaking, and this is something I've talked about over and over again, so I don't want to beat it up, but sure. I'm just, like, I'm not a fan of, like I literally don't even think I'd want my own wedding one day. Like, I literally don't look at that. I'm not like, oh, man, a wedding, or things like that, where it's like, that's what, society, you grow up, it's like, oh, man, you're going to get married, you're going to have a wedding, or, like, society's like, oh, man, you're going to have that college degree, you gotta make sure you have a house and kids and a family by age this or whatever. Like, we've grown up with those things, but I feel like it's becoming more traditional and more like, or less traditional to have those things kind of like yelling at you, but we're still in a space. Do you get what I'm saying? Where it's like, we're in a space where those things are still very real, but they're over here and they're not very real at the same time. So it's like, it's kind of like a weird thing. So I'm wondering if, like, down the road, it's like people that are like, literally by the time I'm not even on this planet anymore, damn near, like, people that are way in another generation looking at this, and they're going to be like, what the hell is those guys talking about?
You already see it now, right? And I think the other thing that I would say is that, especially the benefit of the internet is that it's started to highlight these more unique, nuanced situations, right? Mm-hmm. You have to understand that for the past 30, 40 years, there's been entire industries built on, the wedding planning industry, the housing industry, and again, obviously, given the fact that, the pandemic certainly shifted quite a few things around, which needed to happen, I personally think.
We're currently even seeing shifts in the TV industry with the writer's strike.
Absolutely.
Like, literally shows being questioned if they should be around anymore, type of thing. Right. That was a huge cause of it, but I don't want to dive too far into that. But that's what I'm saying, like, stuff like that. Yeah. It's like, literally.
Yeah, and again, the thing that I would maybe highlight is that, again, you're seeing the benefit is that you're seeing sort of the changing of the guard between sort of older generations, baby boomers, whatnot, that just were not introduced to the tools of the internet and how advanced it is. They're still very much on the tail end of that learning curve. Now, don't get me wrong, have there been people within that generation that have learned how to adapt to it? Absolutely.
Yeah. Like, my grandma uses her iPhone.
Absolutely, which is great. But but they again, it comes back to what we said earlier. There was just a different value system there that, again, kind of harder to instill a little bit later in life. It's not unchangeable, but it is something harder, for someone who's early on in their life trying to figure it out. So I would say ultimately you're starting to see that change of color of the guard of, there's plenty of millennials that are like, home ownership, good luck with these interest rates. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's, not to say it's unreachable, but the economics aren't lending itself to, back when, your parents' generation were able to buy their house. The economics were much more advantageous. So, again, that's mainly to highlight that we're starting to see the economic realities, the economic pressures that are facing young people today. That are making it harder to reach the older goals that are quote unquote traditional.
Right, you're right. That's a very good point.
And so you're seeing the attitude shift in real time to younger people to say, well, hey, first off, do I even want to work this hard or 3 times as hard just to reach ground zero?
Right, especially right now.
And
you're just swimming. You're just trying to eat food at that for working that hard.
And so when you look at content creation, and especially something like TikTok, which has really kind of showed you the unfiltered sort of level of, we've gotten more news from TikTok than we have from traditional news outlets like Fox, like CNN. And so what the benefit of social, the benefit of content creation that's helped.
I just thought about Tucker being fired and it made me laugh again.
Yeah, that's a whole nother. It must have been the bow tie, that's what I think. But yeah, I mean, again, you're sort of looking at that nuance of saying that you have young people adopting a platform who are actively seeking out more truth and information that they've been introduced to be able to discuss topics that are very pertinent to young people, millennials, Gen Z. I can't buy a house, the housing crisis, and the benefit that I see to that is the fact that you have a flow of information where young people who are facing very similar pressures, economic pressures, values, they have a safe space to talk about it freely, to continue to just sort of direct that conversation, because eventually, in a short due time, these are the people that will be taking over Congress, 100%. Senate, making those rules to understand these are very complex issues, but we're passionate about it to get that done.
Slowly kind of getting there.
Exactly. So I think, again, without kind of going too much in a tangent, because we've been able to highlight people who are similar of age, similar of circumstance, we are seeing people that maybe are feeling less bad about their circumstances because they're no longer isolated. They can confirm that there are other people in the comment section, in the video section. Oh, you can't afford a house too? Oh, I'm trying my best to work 2 jobs to pay my rent. You're struggling as well. Yeah. While it's still a struggle, it does make you feel better that it at least unearths the illusion that you were the only one going through it. And again, that sort of is helped sort of maybe, I think to some extent, help alleviate sort of the mental health crisis that's been going in this running rampant.
I would like to think
country.
It's helped some people to a degree.
I would hope so. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
but it's obviously not the overall. We're not here to say that fixed all mental health issues.
No, that's a whole complex issue.
It's still a very, very real thing that's going on.
Right.
But yeah, that's a good point though. I do think that over time there's going to be people in a higher position. I think it's just like the positions of power right now that's causing a lot of the ruckus between. I think it's just like that you're looking at who's in charge. You got the old white people. Again, the old white men, I should say, making these terrible decisions.
The changing of the guard, and you see that this will be a whole nother podcast. This will be for a whole nother
Steve and I are going to have to do an episode 2,
we
you know what I'm saying?
Probably will.
Come on, I'll go out to California and do it.
Yeah, there's that. But I would say, again, you can see that in real time with the issues of, again, the very highly debated issues of, abortion, any of that stuff here. That's a very hot topic that, again, but again, these are topics that are pertinent to so many people that, again, we, young people bear the responsibility of understanding how do we want to continue to direct this. So if there's anything that I would at least on those topics, I would say people is that if you've been sitting on the sidelines, sort of maybe unsure about where you stand, how to voice your opinion, I would just highly, highly, highly encourage you to, have the courage to make sure that, when it comes to an election year in your state, your city, federal, to do what you can to at least, again, show up and and participate.
Even for the people that, and, you're saying it, but I want to add this in is, even if you're one of those people that's like, oh, man, I'm not interested in politics,
right.
or, whatever it is. I've even heard people be like, oh, I don't pay attention to politics. I'm not into politics. And they think that, somehow voting is now them being involved in politics. And it's yeah, it is. It is. But do you want to create a better world for yourself? Or do you not? Do you want to just sit in the sidelines?
Well, if there's anything that I can tell you is that for every person that says my vote doesn't count, there's probably about 100,000 other people that have that same mindset.
Yeah.
And the only reason why I say that is because I think it was even this election year, it was within, I believe, 200 votes, something very minor, a very small margin. Yeah. It was very close. And again, so for people to discredit that their vote doesn't matter
is dumb.
Is just plain inaccurate. And so I would just encourage you to make sure that you, in the absence of action, these, bad actors and evil doers have opportunity to fill the void. And so I would just encourage you to make sure to be proactive, to have a voice, because this is going to be the country that you are inheriting.
Yeah.
And, at the end of the day, who do you want sort of making the laws about it? Yourself in your generation and like-minded peers that will help address the problems that they're experiencing and standing and shouldering by you, or someone who's completely out of touch and still doesn't know what TikTok is and how that connects to the Wi-Fi.
Joe Biden knows what TikTok is.
I'm sure he does. But that's a whole other thing.
That's a good point.
But beyond that, man, just in general, kind of coming back to sort of multifaceted stuff. This has been a longer conversation.
We can bring it to a close.
Yeah, I think I hope people, if there's any takeaways from this, the key here is if you for anybody who's out there maybe who doesn't maybe have a passion yet, they're thinking I'm too old, I'm washed up, I'm past that point.
Yeah.
Just really looking for any inspiration. Just they find themselves in whatever circumstance they find themselves ridden with obligations. How do I even have time to even consider, even watch this podcast? If they even found
if you've made it to here, you're a champion.
We appreciate
I do have a handful of people that watch to the end. They'll let me know. They'll turn it on in their car.
And I think we can always put timestamps to stuff like this if we ever need to. And I hope that people get value out of different perspectives and whatnot. So
this has been two white guys.
Yeah. Having
two
a
white guys
conversation
in the middle of Illinois, censoring it so that I don't get doxxed.
Right. There's that. Yeah. But
I know that everyone watching this would love to dox me. Yeah. They'd love to know the address of this crazy park that I'm at.
Right.
My bed is right there.
Yeah.
They're going to come find me.
Yes. Campsite's right through there. But yeah, I think ultimately, man, to wrap it up, man, just know that people have more agency than they think. Give yourself credit. Give yourself grace. Wherever you're at, you have absolutely even if you have other people in your close circle, the people that you follow, the content you consume, telling you otherwise, I just want to, leave it on a positive note, man. You have more agency than you think. My medium might be skateboarding, but yours could be anything different. If you don't know what you want to do,
going to the gym, it could be football, it could be soccer, it could be baseball, it could be whatever you want it to be.
It could be anything, even if you don't have anything passionate about it. I would encourage you to just be willing to try anything. You will know when you have an interest in something and you feel a magnetic pull to it. That's a good place to start digging deeper, because you never know where it's going to lead you. I think have the courage to do that, because you always can get back to where you are now.
Dang. Either you're a longtime watcher of the podcast or it just came natural, because that's what I always ask at the end for, that banger advice at the end. But you just nailed it. It's like you've been on here before. You knew it. You came in swinging. Man, that was... I don't even have anything better to say to that. I'm going to leave it on that. I think that's a very good way to end it.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you guys watching. If you did enjoy this conversation, do leave a comment. Let us know what else you'd like to hear, because I am going to go to California, and we are going to do another episode. More than likely, because Steve and I could sit in a parking lot in the middle of California for 4.5 hours and just talk.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let us know what else you want to hear from two white guys. And I would love for you to subscribe. I see I debated you. But hit that subscribe button, and I will talk to you later. Peace. Oh, dude, it wasn't recording. No.